In this video, we're going to start a high-end flagship PC build titled Zero Compromise. If you've wanted to build your first gaming PC but have been a little bit leery due to astronomical prices on PC parts or a simple lack of knowledge and the confidence to build a PC, this is the video for you. In 4 easy to understand episodes, I'm going to break down the entire PC building process, starting with how to shop for PC parts to get the lowest price and also make sure there's no compatibility issues. Then across 2 episodes with chapters or timestamps for easy navigation, we're going to build a high-end flagship PC with the most premium components currently on the market. Then I'm going to show you the steps to take when you turn on your PC for the first time, including installing Windows, uninstalling bloatware, mapping storage drives. Then we're going to wet our whistle and dip our beaks in some benchmarks to see the actual practical performance of the ridiculous PC we're building in these episodes. Without further ado, kick up your feet, grab a rack of ribs, crack a brew, because this is going to be a long one. That's not what she said, unfortunately. So this lovely blessing on the world is PCPartPicker.com, which is by far the most valuable website when it comes to building a new PC. It does 2 things very effectively. The first one, and most importantly, is selecting all of your components to make sure there's no incompatibility with physical sizes of being able to put parts in a case, also having not enough wattage from your power supply to give enough juice to your parts, or picking a motherboard that's for the wrong CPU, or trying to pick parts that simply don't work well with others. Let me show you what I mean. They of course have build guides and some complete builds, but we're going to spend our time right here in the system builder. As you can see, it simply breaks out all the parts of a PC. We're going to start with the CPU. And if you want to check multiple items, for example, maybe they're storage devices and you have 3 different hard drives, you can do that. But as we just have this one CPU, we're going to go click add over here on the far right. Now, other than helping you with compatibility, PC Part Picker gathers prices from things like Newegg, Best Buy, Micro Center, Amazon, compares the price with tax and shipping, and gives you the lowest price. So while you're going to click on the link and buy your components from, say, for example, Amazon, this service will compare all prices. And as you can see, with just that one part, it is recommending 240 watts of power. That is a power-thirsty CPU. Now, there's also a search menu up here, so we're looking for a Thermaltake. So the AIO cooler I'm using is a Thermaltake Toughliquid 240, and as you can see, they do not have that here. That happens occasionally. And as you can see, the site is already doing its job. We have a compatibility warning. These parts have potential issues or incompatibilities. See the details below. Warning, the i9 processor does not include a stock CPU cooler. You're right, it does not. So as you can see, it also gives you a visual diagram. This is our motherboard. This is our CPU seated into that. There's 4 RAM slots on that motherboard. There's 3 M.2 slots. There's all these expansion slots, and there's these specific USB headers. So it'll even show you what fans you can use with your motherboard in case. So this is how you are going to spec out your PC build, plan it out, map it out before you actually purchase any parts. Now, I do recommend purchasing PC parts from vendors like Amazon that have a no questions asked return policy, where it says on all computer parts that if it comes DOA or dead on arrival, they'll take it back, no questions asked. Or Amazon takes it a step further. Within the first 30 days, if you have any issues with virtually any product on their website, at least if it has Prime shipping, you can apply for a full refund due to not being satisfied with the product or it just not being right for you. Now, I also recommend buying new components. I know there's a vast wide world of used PC parts out there, and I'm all about minimizing e-waste. But if you plan on having this PC for several years, I do recommend purchasing new because you will have manufacturer warranties on all these parts. When you're building a PC from scratch, part by part, all of these components will have some type of a manufacturer warranty. Plus, if you buy it from somewhere like Amazon, you have that additional return policy. Also, when buying components on the used market, you have no idea how it was treated. Just like buying a used car from a teenager, the back tires are bald, you know that guy's been spinning donuts in it. The profitability of mining Ethereum and other cryptocurrencies is in the crapper right now, so a lot of people are offloading their GPUs on the used market now. Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, if you're not afraid of getting stabbed, eBay, StockX, etc. So you might be tempted to go there, but I would recommend buying new parts if you can find them at MSRP, which luckily PC parts are starting to level out and are almost back to normal. And falling in line with having a warranty, I do recommend that you keep your instruction manuals for all of these components, as a lot of them do have the warranty and regulatory guide in the back where you're actually going to register and get your warranty activated. Not to mention, it is always good to keep the instruction manuals for at least your motherboard and your case, because if you ever go to add an accessory or change out a part, you know exactly what port or plug that you're supposed to be dealing with. There's a dead dog over there. She's not really dead, she's just napping. PC builds really take it out of her. So let's talk money a little bit. Let's get personal. Let's talk about your budget. Obviously, I'm never going to tell you to live outside your means. However, I will say you do not want to have buyer's remorse by thinking, oh God, I should have popped for a better CPU, or, oh, well, my buddy Jerry down the street's got a 3080 and I have a 3070, bastard. Bet his schmeckle's bigger too. Something like a PC that is going to last you several years if treated correctly is something you don't really want to cut corners on. I would recommend starting a savings account, whether that's a physical jar in your house or your bank account, setting a little cash aside each month, maybe selling some old crap in the garage and attic. So I recommend you don't cut corners or skimp. However, there are some aspects and areas that you can compromise on to lower the cost a little bit. For example, the case. You can get a very basic case that still gets good cooling, but doesn't look super exotic, doesn't have premium materials like metal and tempered glass side panels. You can go with SSDs instead of NVMEs. Shoot, you could even go the mechanical hard drive route. I do not recommend it. We'll talk about that later. You could get just enough storage for the games that you actively play. It's kind of a pain in the rump to have to uninstall old games to install new stuff, but if you're on a budget, that's an option. The power supply. I personally can vouch for this. I had a 650 watt bronze power supply, which is one step from the bottom when it comes to power ratings on PSUs, and that thing worked perfectly under heavy load and getting thrashed for over 2 years. Still fine today. Also, case fans. Believe it or not, a lot of cheap generic case fans are actually pretty decent. They have good CFM, meaning they push good airflow. They're relatively quiet and have a decent lifespan. So you don't need to go with name brand Noctua fans that are $50 for one 120 millimeter fan when you can get a 5-pack with a control module and a remote control for around $35. And I know that sounds spooky and scary, but trust me, they will give you sufficient cooling. I believe it was Jay's 2 cents that did a test on cheap fans, and he was like, wow, these are actually really good. And I trust Jay. And his 2 cents, his Buffalo nickels. Other than that, I wouldn't recommend paying Microsoft for a copy of Windows, as it is about $100 when you can get licensed OEM factory keys, which I will show you in a later video, for around $20. And as for RAM, get the type that you want, but maybe go lower in gigabytes, in actual size. Because as long as your motherboard has 4 RAM slots, which I recommend you do get a motherboard that has 4 RAM slots, not 2 or 1, because down the road you can buy another kit with 2 more sticks of RAM and just snap those in. So if you want to start with 16 gigabytes of RAM and then maybe down the road buy another 2 sticks and pop those in for 32 gigs, now you do need to make sure that it is the same brand, the same model, and also the same clock speed. For example, you've got some 3600 megahertz sticks and some 2800 megahertz sticks. It ain't gonna be a good day for you. I mean, it's not gonna like ruin your PC. It probably just won't boot. It'll be stuck in the BIOS menu spamming F2. Other than the components I mentioned, I wouldn't recommend skimping out on anything else. Definitely not your CPU and GPU. So how about a quick breakdown of all the parts that go into a PC build? First of all, you have the tower, case, or chassis. These words are used interchangeably, but it's the big plastic or metal box that you're shoving all these components into. Then you have the motherboard, which all other parts are going to plug, snap, screw, or insert themselves into. What motherboard you get is going to dictate if you have features like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, how fast your wired Ethernet speeds are, what kind of RAM and CPUs you can use, how many and what type of ports and plugs you have in the back, such as USB 3.0, USB-C, lightning bolt connectors. Then you have the CPU or central processing unit. This is the brains of the operation. It is going to run all of your processes. It is important for gaming, as a lot of games are CPU heavy, some are GPU or graphics card heavy, and some are even RAM heavy. Every CPU has physical cores and then virtual threads that allow it to multitask and do tons of productivity work. So if you plan on using this for streaming, where you're going to be using a screen capturing service like OBS while playing a game and maybe having a web browser open, you probably want a pretty hefty CPU. I would recommend an i7 or above on the Intel side of the house and like a Ryzen 5 or 7 on the AMD side of the house. There's 2 major manufacturers of CPUs, Intel and AMD. Then to keep your CPU cool, you have to use a CPU cooler. You can either go air cooled, which is basically a heat sink and a fan, or you can take the water cooled route. There's 2 different variations of that. There's AIOs, or all-in-ones, which have a radiator, pump, hoses, and a block, as well as 1, 2, or 3 fans. Or you can do a custom water cooling loop where you are bending tubes to fit in your case and you source all the parts separately. So the radiator, pump, block, hoses, and you fill it up with liquid, usually some bright, vibrant colors, maybe some some glow-in-the-dark slime or something. And they are higher maintenance, but they do offer superior cooling generally, although there's some pretty sweet AIOs in the market. There's also really good air coolers on the market as well. Then you have your storage. This is where you're going to stash everything. This is your backpack, where you're going to stuff your games and your dirty videos and your not illegally downloaded music files. There are 4 different types of storage. You've got mechanical hard drives, which are the cheapest, but they are the crappiest, and they are simply outdated technology. I used to recommend them for bulk storage, things that you don't need to access quickly, but now I don't even do that. I recommend you get an SSD, which is a solid state drive. They read and write data a lot quicker. They are smaller. They are less power thirsty. They produce less heat. They're more efficient. They're more reliable. They don't get fragmented. They're just better. Then you've got hybrid drives, which in my opinion is a complete marketing gimmick. They tout them as being half SSD, half mechanical hard drive. I actually owned one 2 PCs ago, and it was more like a mechanical hard drive than an SSD. Then you have PCIe, NVMe, M.2s. That's a huge name. You can just call them NVMEs or M.2 drives. They are a little chip that goes directly on the motherboard, and they are faster than SSDs. They are the best storage as far as speeds are concerned. However, they are by far the most expensive. Then you have memory, or RAM, which stands for random access memory. This gets confused with storage a lot. It doesn't store any data whatsoever on the sticks. You do have a cache of data, but it is usually very tiny. What these do is split the load of multitasking with your CPU. So if you have 37 browsers open in Chrome and 3 applications and you're running a game, you're going to bog down or fill up your RAM. You might be using 10 gigabytes, but you only have 8 gigs of RAM. If you had 16, you'd have a little bit of overhead there. If you had 32 gigabytes, you'd have even more headroom. If you had 64, you're a lunatic, or you're a video editor or something. As for RAM, they go in different sizes. I would go no less than 16 gigabytes. 32 is also good as well. There's 2 different common technologies currently, DDR4 and the current flagship, which is DDR5. And then all RAM has a clock speed, how fast that RAM is. And that is measured in megahertz. So 3600 megahertz, 5600 megahertz, etc. Higher number better, usually more expensive. And some motherboards don't support it. Then you've got the big daddy that everyone talks about, the GPU, the graphics processing unit, the graphics card. There are 2 major manufacturers of graphics cards. You have AMD, which sure enough also makes CPUs, and then you have Nvidia. I personally think Nvidia cards are far superior. I have multiple reasons for saying that, but it's a long topic and I'd rather make an entire video on it. But just to quickly summarize, it has what's called NVENC, which is an onboard encoder. So if you are going to be screen capturing or streaming, I strongly recommend going the Nvidia route. Also, there's a ton of technologies that Nvidia has been doing for like 8 years that AMD is just now getting on board with. Things like DLSS, or deep learning super sampling, which is a way of dynamically upscaling, and also ray tracing. And AMD has their own technologies on their side of the house for all of those things, but they're just not. They're not. No offense if anybody watching has an AMD graphics card. Some of their flagship cards are very nice, very powerful. I am just team green when it comes to graphics cards, and I have my reasons. Again, I'll make a separate video on that. Then you have the power supply, or PSU, power supply unit. This is what is going to take electricity from your wall, make sure that it gets the right voltage and wattage, and then disseminates that out to all the different parts inside of your PC via cables that are either built into the PSU or modular, meaning they can pop out. There are hundreds of brands of power supplies. They all go by the same standards, which are based on efficiency of how well that PSU manages incoming power and how much of it actually gets utilized properly and not wasted. They are rated at 80 plus bronze, 80 plus silver, 80 plus gold, 80 plus platinum, and 80 plus titanium. Or sometimes you might hear it called diamond. Certain brands call it like weird stuff like diamond or onyx, but yeah. Then you're going to need an operating system. This is the software that runs a GUI, or graphic user interface. It is what you see when you turn the PC on. So for most people, that's going to be Windows 10 or 11. Some people also like Linux because of its customizability. If you're on Macintosh or Apple Mac computers, your operating system is going to be iOS. And then you are going to need what's called computer peripherals or accessories in order to use your PC. Obviously, a monitor to see what the hell's going on, a keyboard to type things, a mouse to move around the pointer. Even if you have a good pair of headphones or cans, you're probably still going to want speakers for external sound. And then other things like printers and UPS or uninterruptible power supplies that you can plug into your PC. So first of all, let's meet our contestants, i.e. let's meet the components we're putting into this build. Come a little bit closer. I'm not saying you got to be sitting on my lap or anything. I'm not going to stop you if you want to, but I'd like you a little closer so you can see the parts going into this PC and why I chose them. So first of all, the heart and the brain of this operation, i.e. the motherboard and the CPU, or central processing unit. This happened to be a perfect time to build build a PC as component prices, PC parts are coming down in price to a reasonable or almost normal level. These two parts were purchased together as a bundle on Amazon for $1,044, which saves roughly $150 if you were to buy these components individually. This CPU is a 12th generation Intel i9, model number 12900K. The 12 stands for 12th generation, which is the latest and most current version of Intel CPUs. The 900 correlates to what series they are, for example 900 in the i9 or 700 for the i7s. The letter K indicates that these have been unlocked by the manufacturer and can be overclocked. And by the way, the i9s are tremendously popular for overclocking, but you got to make sure you have the right cooling for that, which we do. We'll get to that in a bit. Now, there are two different versions of this chip, the K and the KF. The KF is missing a small component that handles onboard video encoding. However, if you're going to have a dedicated GPU or graphics card, which anybody watching this video I'm sure is going to have a GPU, it really doesn't matter, and they are priced virtually identically. Sometimes the KF is actually more expensive, which is surprising because it's actually missing a feature of the K. But neither one is necessarily superior. There are certain studies that have shown that the KF series, the one that does not have a graphic processor, so not this version, is slightly better in overclocking situations. However, that's not really substantiated, and there's not enough proven research to stand behind that claim. Just a couple of Redditors out there that swear by the KF. Bottom line is, if you see a K or KF and it's the right price for you, go ahead and snag it up. You're not missing out. But this is the flagship or currently highest end processor that Intel offers. As far as consumer use CPUs are concerned, Intel also does have their X series, but that is aimed strictly at competitive use enthusiasts. And as for real world practicality and gaming performance, specifically gaming performance, the Intel Core series is what you're going to stick with. i5, i7, i9. These retail for $600 currently on Amazon. However, just a couple months ago, these were going in the $900 range. That's why I said PC prices are starting to come back down. Thank God. But the packaging on this thing, it's in a gold carrying case. That's cool. I just realized I was getting a terrible reflection from my ring light on the TV over there. My apologies. It looks like it's my first day on YouTube. As for the motherboard, we went with the ASUS ROG, or Republic of Gamers, which is their gaming division, much like HP has Omen and Dell has Alienware. And this is their current flagship or highest end motherboard available. It is the Strix Z690E with Wi-Fi. Three things that you need to make sure of when you are purchasing a motherboard is going to be, one, that it is compatible with your CPU, as there are different motherboards for not just Intel and AMD, but also different generations. For example, this motherboard works with 12th generation Intel CPUs. Then there's also very niche CPUs like the Threadripper from AMD, which is actually a different size and shape. It's more of a rectangle than a square, and you need to have a motherboard with a specific slot for that. The second thing is going to be the size of your motherboard. Will it fit in the case that you're buying? Over my shoulder, I have the common sizes of motherboards. There are 4, and there's 3 common sizes of cases or chassis, the box that you're going to put all your parts into. There is 4 common sizes of PC cases or chassis. At the very smallest end, we have SFFs or small form factors, so things that look like a game console. Maybe you want a really tiny PC that packs in a ton of performance. Generally, cooling can be an issue with these, so people steer clear of them. Then you have mini towers, which are slightly bigger. Next up, we have the most common size. Every PC that I have built, including the one we're working on here today, is a mid tower, might be referred to as a mid ATX tower. And then you have a full size or a full tower, which are freakishly large, and you can stuff multiple GPUs in there. You could have multiple mechanical hard drives. There's a ton of internal volume to work on components, but it will take up a good chunk of your desk and your room. As for motherboards, you do have 4 common sizes, and this is a little bit confusing. At the smallest end, you have mini ATX, and mini is actually smaller than micro ATX. And anything else, for example, USB cables, micro is smaller than mini. However, mini is the smallest, then micro ATX, commonly referred to as M-ATX. Then you have a standard or ATX motherboard, and then you have eATX at the large end of the spectrum. Now, the size of cases and motherboards has absolutely zero to do with the features and performance. There are high-end mini ATX cases and motherboards, and then there are standard or entry-level full-size towers and eATX motherboards. So do not think that a larger size means more performance. So we've made sure our motherboard has a compatible slot for our CPU that we're using, and we made sure it's the correct size for our case or chassis. The box we're shoving everything into too. Shoving every boy. Now, generally a mid ATX case will fit an ATX, M-ATX, or mini ATX. If you buy a small form factor case, most likely you'll fit a micro or mini ATX. And a full-size tower, you can just go ahead and move your extended family in there. You don't need a mother-in-law cottage in your backyard. It's like a small apartment. You can just move your friends and family in there. Now, last but certainly not least, when looking for a motherboard, you want to make sure that it has the features that you need for your build. As the theme of this build is absolutely zero compromises, this is loaded to the gills with all the bells and whistles. A little bit of a boomer term there. These have 3 NVMe M.2 slots, all with their own metal heat sinks. This has 2.5G Ethernet. This has a slew of the fastest and latest USB plugs. This supports the latest generation of CPUs. This has 4 RAM slots that will support DDR5 RAM up to 6400 megahertz with an overclock. All those slots are dual channel, by the way. So if you have 1 stick of RAM, that's dual channel. You got 2 sticks of RAM, that's quad channel. This also has 18+1 power stages. So this will do a very good job of modulating power to make sure that all your components plugged into the motherboard, as all the components do plug into this one central piece, it makes sure all components are getting the right amount of power at the right time in the right situations. Size-wise, this is an ATX, so it's 12 inches by 9.6 inches. And as for PCIe slots, which is what you are going to seat your GPU into, as well as any video capture cards or PCIe accessories, it has 4 slots. One is a 5.0, one is a 4.0, and 2 are 3.0s. Lastly, this does have Wi-Fi 6E as well as the latest Bluetooth technologies with an external antenna that you can run and place on top of your tower. This thing is a beast. As for cooling in this rig, we are going to have 5 Coolmoon fans over here, which do have a control module. They do, of course, have RGB, a remote control. They are 120 millimeters, which is the most common fan size. They are rated at 38 CFM of airflow, and they can reach a fan speed of 1300 RPMs or revolutions per minute at about 20 decibels. And these do have an estimated lifespan of about 40,000 hours of runtime, which actually isn't too great, but that's fine. When these crap out, we'll just go to some Noctua fans. We have a Thermaltake AIO or all-in-one cooling solution. This has 2 fans and a 240 millimeter radiator that will be bolted up to the top of the case. You have 2 high-flow radiator tubes that will lead down to the actual block, as well as the CPU cooler. And this CPU cooler actually has a high-resolution LCD screen on board, so you can monitor your CPU temps, put a funny GIF image or a static picture on there. This operates at around 28 decibels, uses a high-performance copper base plate that accelerates heat conductivity, has a highly reliable low-profile pump to provide quick liquid circulation. This is water-cooled if there's any novices watching. An AIO is a water cooler, but unlike a custom water loop that requires you bending tubes and hoses, buying individual components like the radiator, then the water block, the pump, an AIO is sure enough a all-in-one solution. This has a low evaporation tube which decreases the loss of coolant effectively. A good AIO, you very, very rarely need to top off fluids. Then you have dual 120 millimeter Tough fans, little marketing name there, and this does have universal socket compatibility, so this will work with all Intel and AMD CPUs, minus unique, rare, weird ones like the Threadripper, which I mentioned earlier is a rectangle, not a square. Now, this Thermaltake AIO, as well as the RAM we're using in this build, which is from Viper Gaming, was sent out for an honest review and also to be part of this build, so thank you greatly to both of these companies for supporting the channel. The RAM, or random access memory, that we are using in this build is Viper Venom DDR5 RAM, clocked out of the box at 6200 megahertz. Now, this is a 32 gig kit, so that is 2 sticks of 16 gigabytes. But again, we know those are dual channel, so technically we're on quad channel. These, of course, have RGB, a nice metal heatsink that will allow us a little bit of flexibility when it comes to overclocking, which we are going to be overclocking the CPU and the RAM, probably not the GPU. You're about to see what we're using for that in a minute. You're about to see what we're doing in the graphics department in just a second here. As for the graphics card or GPU or graphics processing unit, we've got an Nvidia 3080 Ti. Hold on a tick. You wait just 1 second here. This build's all about no compromises, being over the top, outlandish, wild, sucking so much energy from the wall I gotta buy a generator. Graphical performance that'll pop my corneas every time I power on the case. This just ain't gonna cut it. Get him out of here. Oh, your big brother. Good thing I've been hitting the gym. This is heavy. We've got this completely ridiculous GPU, and I do mean ridiculous. It has an outlandish price tag, a freakish amount of power draw. It's big as hell and heavy as shit, so you need a massive case or chassis to support that. And 60% of its performance would be completely never even seen or utilized by the average gamer. This really isn't a consumer graphics card for gaming. This is more of a productivity card if you're doing some heavy video editing, 4K and 8K, or maybe you're doing some streaming. And while this ASUS is an insane card with some freakish numbers when it comes to teraflops, cuticores, ray tracing units. For the average gamer building a PC, a 3080, which is currently in this PC over my shoulder, is the sweet spot. A 3080 Ti is 1% less powerful than a 3090, and a 3090 Ti is about 10% more powerful than a 3090. But the price jumps are so significant between those. A 3080 at retail is $700. A 3080 Ti at retail is $1,200. And a 3090 Ti at retail, which luckily I did pick this card up at tax-free at the Navy Exchange on base, is a $2,000 graphics card that also requires you to have a hefty case and a meaty power supply to back it up. But this build is all about zero compromises and having the most ridiculous flagship components that you can slam into a PC case. That's what we're doing here today. That, and I'm showing you how to build a PC. So you might be wondering, why do you have both of these cards? Good question. I partially didn't have the answer myself there for a second, but I've come up with something. For benchmarks, like I said, I have a 3080 in that PC right now, 3080 Ti over here, and a 3090 Ti over here. So I can benchmark and compare real world performance. Not to mention, I most likely will be selling the 3080 Ti, not scalping it for ridiculous prices and on StockX or Facebook Marketplace or anything, but I have a lot of buddies that are trying to build graphics cards that don't have access to the Navy Exchange, so it'd be nice to sell it at retail. Retail plus 30%, baby. I'm just kidding, I'm not a scalper. Also, in one of the PCIe slots, other than our graphics card, we are going to be using this Elgato Cam Link Pro, which will allow me to use 4K photography style cameras like a mirrorless or DSLR. For example, this Sony a5100 recording me currently. This will allow me to use my Elgato Stream Deck on the desk to switch through 4 different camera views in my room on the fly. As for the PSU or power supply unit, we have an EVGA 1000 watt gold power supply. 1000 watts? 1000 watts is the minimum recommendation for the 3090 Ti. And then I'm going to have that power thirsty i9 in there, and she'll be getting overclocked. Then all the fans, then a bunch of storage devices like SSDs and NVMEs, plus God knows whatever else I'll plug into that motherboard. That's not a big enough number. Get him out of here. Oh my God. I hope this fits in the case. This is actually a physically bigger PSU. I thought they were the same size. It's not. It's also very heavy. This is an EVGA 1300 GT, which is a 1300 watt 80 plus gold power supply. This thing comes with a free Perfy 12 cable, which is compatible with the Nvidia GeForce RTX 30 series cards. Well, I should hope so, because that's what's going inside this. Now, when you're buying a PSU or power supply unit, you have some standards, some ratings, some certifications, some standards that these are all rated at. Now, I've never seen a PSU rated plus. I would not trust it. It's probably a fire hazard or at least savagely inefficient. Bronze is totally fine in a budget PC. My first gaming PC had a 650 watt bronze power supply. I mined with that PC. I streamed with that PC. I left it on practically 24 hours a day for 2 years. No issues with the PSU. Then there is silver, then gold, then titanium or platinum, depending on the brand. They might call it one of those two, but titanium and platinum are pretty much like that. So there's a lot of factors on how these power supplies get their ratings, their stamp, their color. It all comes down to efficiency. How efficient is that power supply at drawing current from the wall? And when I say wall, I am not talking about plugging your computer directly into the wall. And I also don't recommend that you plug into a surge protector. I recommend you get an UPS or uninterruptible power supply. I actually have one right under there. You can't see that, but I will overlay some B-roll right now. I've done an entire video on it. It is the best investment you can make in your gaming PC. People spend well over $1,000, shoot, maybe $3-4 grand building a custom PC and then plug it into a $40 Walmart surge protector. That is idiotic and asinine. Her face is a 3, but her ass is a 9. So what an UPS or uninterruptible power supply is going to do is if your house loses power, which I'm in Florida, we have these lightning storms all the time, and I lose power here in the house. The UPS will keep my PC, monitor, modem, and a ton of other accessories running for about 40 minutes. If I'm not in the house at that time, it will automatically soft shut down my PC as it is plugged in via USB to my PC. It'll say, hey, I'm going to shut down this PC softly, rather than it just losing electricity all of a sudden. Not just blackouts, also rolling brownouts, where your lights may flicker, but you don't lose electricity completely. Those are surges or fluctuations in electricity. A UPS is going to smooth that out to where you are always getting a consistent voltage and wattage to your PC. No more, no less than what your PC needs. Now, a good PSU in combination with an UPS is going to be very efficient. addition, it is going to save you money on your electric bill, produce less heat, be quieter because it's running more efficiently. It's not wound out, pinned out at a maximum RPM, and they generally last a lot longer because, again, they're doing their job efficiently. They're not working very hard. They're just doing it because it's easy for them. So I would recommend, if you're going for a high-end PC, to get a gold or better. So gold, platinum, or titanium. Budget PC, bronze. Silver, cool too. Whatever's on sale, really. As for storage, we are going to have a total of 8 terabytes of storage available. There is going to be a 4 terabyte SSD or solid state drive. That is going to be primarily for retro game collections, backups of ROMs, ISO files, image files, basically all things PC emulation will be on that hard drive, as well as any bulk storage, additional video projects that I'm working on, an archive of past videos, stuff like that. Then we are going to have 4 terabytes of NVMe storage that is broken up by a 1 terabyte Viper VP4300, which has a metal heatsink already installed, but I will be removing that because the motherboard that we purchased does already have very high quality heat sinks for these NVMEs. You do need to use a heatsink with an NVMe. These read and write data at such a fast speed that they get hot, not just to the touch, but they get hot. How fast do they read and write? Well, high-end or flagship NVMEs have transfer speeds up to around 7,400 megabytes a second, or 7.4 gigs a second. That's freaking fast. This 1 terabyte is going to be for the operating system, Windows 10 Pro, as well as programs and productivity applications. This 2 gigabyte N70 Evo Plus NVMe will be for modern game storage, so AAA modern games. And then there is a Sabrent Rocket 1 terabyte NVMe installed in the PC over my head that will be transplanted into the new PC, and that one is going to be used strictly and solely for screen capturing with OBS. So when I'm doing my screen recordings of gameplay, it is important that you are recording your screen captures, your gameplay footage, to a storage device that is not the same one that your game file is on, because then it's splitting or sharing its read and write speed. It's trying to record your gameplay and encode it into MP4 or WAV format, whatever you're saving it as. Plus, it's constantly reading game files. So ideally, you want to separate those and have a drive just for capturing your gameplay, your screen recordings, and a separate one that you store your games on. So in total, 8 terabytes of storage, 4 terabytes of NVMe, which is the fastest, 4 terabytes of SSD or solid state drive, which is the middle tier. Then you have mechanical hard drives down here. I would steer well and clear of those if you are building a modern PC. Even the high RPM, high speed mechanical hard drives, which are rated at like 7,200 RPM, they draw more electricity, they get hotter, they get fragmented, and need to be defragged in your operating system. They're bigger and bulkier than the other storage solutions, and most importantly, they are way slower. There's also something called a hybrid drive that they market as being part SSD, part mechanical. Steer clear of those. I made an entire video about them. They're more like a mechanical than they are anything. So I would recommend having an M.2 NVMe drive, at least for your operating system and your games, and something like an SSD for older games. As for the case or chassis, this is the Antec Torque. It is a mid ATX or MATX. This is a very high-end all metal and acrylic case that does retail for $360. This does have USB 3.0 as well as a USB-C 3.1 port on the front I/O. All the metal panels are CNC machined for precision. This is an open air design, so it will dissipate heat into the ambient air of the room as well as get fresh airflow. Now, it's always a fine line between having a sealed case that will keep out things like dust, debris, pet hair, skin dander, but then also having a case that gets good airflow. So there's semi-open air cases, and then there's full-on open air chassis like this. Now, the main reason that I chose this is simply the cosmetics, the looks. I absolutely support getting some kind of a typical, standard, traditional case. However, me personally, I am done with those kind of cases. I personally like the very exotic looking cases like the Cube and the Pyramid, and well, my current PC right now. Now, this is partially because that PC is going to be a backdrop scene in all of my YouTube videos, so having a wild PC as a backdrop when I'm reviewing a controller or headset is nice. But even if I wasn't whoring myself out on the internet, I personally like to have a PC that when I have guests come over to my house, they walk in here and say, holy shit, what is that thing over there? That thing looks like it's about to take flight, or that thing looks like a transformer, or if that thing had the equipment, I'd let it sleep with my wife. Those are the kind of things that I like to hear. So let's crunch some numbers. What is the total build cost of this PC? This says $5,172.98. However, realistically, one of the NVMe M.2 drives I've already owned. It's in my current PC. It's going to be transplanted or swapped into the new PC. I didn't buy it specifically for this build. So removing the price of that, then another NVMe, the Viper, was sent for review. So I didn't pay for that out of pocket. The all-in-one cooler and the RAM were also sent for review. And the 5-pack of case fans I've had sitting in my closet for over 6 months waiting for a build. So I didn't buy those specifically for this build. build. So out of pocket, realistically, my wallet is down $4,258.99. Now keep in mind, I did save about $104 by bundling the CPU and motherboard. I also got the GPU at recommended retail, 0 markup, and it was tax-free, which tax on a $2,000 item would be, give me a second, 6% sales tax here in Florida. Alexa, what is 6% of 2,000? That would have been an extra $120. So that is a hefty price tag, but this is going to have beastly performances. All of the parts going into this are absolutely flagship top tier shit. Not literal feces. Amber Heard didn't make her way into my house and take a dump in the gamer heaven. Sorry, I had to. And that's just low hanging fruit. I mean, I see the memes all over Facebook and whatnot. It's fresh on my mind. Now, when you compare this price to the popular flagship pre-built PCs from Alienware, HP Omen, CyberPower, iBuyPower, thanks to shopping around with PC Part Picker and also getting some free components, this is cheaper and will perform slightly better with that open air case, which I know some people are going to be like, oh, that's a huge dust magnet. You're going to be sucking up pet dander and hair and cleaning it out all the time. Like I mentioned earlier, it's a fine balance that you have to dance between having a completely sealed case where you don't need to dust it out. Then you have semi-open air cases that you need to clean out every couple of months. And then I'm going to have an open air chassis where probably weekly I go in there with a compressed air gun, or even better yet, I have a tiny little vacuum attachment and just suck all the dust out of there. That's worth it to me to have extremely good airflow because, well, it's open air and it looks super chef kiss. So I was originally going to make this PC build one video. However, it'd probably be about an hour and a half to 2 hours because I'm going over everything leading up to building a PC, making sure the case is compatible, teaching along the way the differences in sizes of cases and motherboards. So rather than making a long video, granted I would have broken it up with timestamps or chapters that you could jump around, it would still be a freakishly long video. And I think it's going to be more beneficial to break this into multiple parts. This first one just being the introduction to the components or parts that are going into this build. The next part will be breaking into that massive box with the case, installing the fans as that case has no pre-installed cooling fans, then installing the RAM, M.2 NVMEs, and CPU into the motherboard, which you do before you put the motherboard in the case. At least it's easier that way because you have access to everything. Easy access. Then part 3 will be assembling everything else, installing the PSU, mounting the graphics card, and any other niche issues that we might run into. And the fourth and final video will be glamour shots showcasing the new PC in all of its glory, followed by extensive benchmarks of the CPU and GPU to see what kind of performance we're getting out of such an outlandish rig. And I'll also show you how to install and activate Windows, as well as what software programs I recommend for content creators, productivity work, gamers, etc., and some of the first steps to take once you turn on your PC for the first time, like uninstalling bloatware, mapping hard drives, and running system diagnostic checks. What am I doing with my hands here? We can just right there at the sides. Drop in the comment section below what you would like to see in the upcoming parts of this build. Maybe you have a particular question about the process of building a PC. Maybe you want a little more information as to why I chose a specific component. Or maybe you just want to slap me on the tuchus and give me a attaboy, that's a good game. I'm down for all of it. Thanks for watching. This has been AK40 Kevin in the gamer heaven, and I'll see you tomorrow. Like, literally, I'll see you tomorrow. I upload daily. Peace. If you enjoyed the video, liking it helps it to get seen by more gamers. This information will reach and assist them as well, which in turn helps me grow this little channel, which I do greatly appreciate. Subscribe for more content like this. I cover news in the gaming community and industry, tutorials helping you get set up streaming and YouTubing, as well as honest gaming product reviews, keyboards, mice, headsets, controllers, mics, chairs, etc. There are some hefty exclusive discount codes found only in the description of my videos and only for the audience here at Gamer Heaven. Check out Into the AM for some of the sickest looking and most comfortable cloth to ever grace my gaming giblets. If you don't want to be scorching your corneas with harmful blue light, check out Gamer Advantage, the only blue light glasses on the market that look sexy and actually work. If you're looking for a custom controller that'll blow the competition's tits back, AIM definitively has the best bang for buck or price to performance when it comes to Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch controllers. Nope, they don't do Switch, but they do gaming mice. I said doo-doo. I have links to all my other platforms and socials in the description below. If you need a quick laugh or blast of gamer adrenaline, check my short form videos out at TikTok. To get in touch with myself and the stallions and stallionettes of Gamer Heaven, join the community Discord, and check me out at twitch.tv where I go live every other leap year on a blue moon if it falls into an odd calendar number, and my pH balance is on point. Just kidding, starting June I'm going to be live streaming a lot. Thanks for watching. This has been AK40 Kevin hosting Gamer Heaven, and I'll see you tomorrow because I upload daily, all the time, 60% of the time, sometimes, most of the time. Peace.